So tonight, we're going to continue our series about the poetry of prayer. And what I would like to do tonight is give an overview of the first three brachos of Shmona Esrei, the first three blessings of the Amidah. Next week, I would love to start learning a little bit about Purim, which is coming up. So we'll take a little bit of a break of our prayer series until after the holidays, because now is holiday season and we want to be fully immersed in that. But what I'd like to do tonight, at least to bring completion to this specific series that we've been having up until now, is to discuss those first three brachos, those first three blessings. Up until now, we've given a little bit of an introduction to prayer, how prayer works. We've spoken about the power of the mind. We've spoken about the power of speech. We went through somewhat of an overview of the structure of the morning prayers, showing how each one corresponds to a different part of the holy temple. We have the morning blessings that correspond to the outer courtyard. We have Psukei de Zimra, verses of song, that correspond to the inner courtyard. We have the Shema that corresponds to the sanctuary. We have the Amidah, the Shmona Esrei, which is the Holy of Holies. So the four sections of prayer correspond to the four sections in the holy temple. We spoke last week about the power of a bracha. Whenever we say bracha, be pink. Whenever we say those words, Baruch Atah, and then we say God's name, you are the source of blessing. So whatever we're doing at that moment, whatever we're blessing, if we're making a blessing on the food that we're about to eat, if we make a blessing on a mitzvah that we're about to do, we are infusing that action with our mindfulness and therefore with the godly potential that is contained within that thing. We spoke about the importance of oscillating, of moving between personal prayer and more structured prayer. So we've really covered a lot of different points in prayer. And I hope that up until now you have found that this has been helpful for you. And those who are slowly trying to take on more and more in your prayer, I hope that some of the ideas that we've been discussing have been valuable for you. So tonight we'll discuss the first three brachos of Shmona Esrei, the first three blessings. So this way, no matter where you find yourself, every service you're going to go to, I don't mean funerals or brises or weddings, I'm not talking about that, actual services, morning service, afternoon service, evening service, Shabbat, weekday, holiday, the one constant is going to be the first three brachos of Shmona Esrei, the first three blessings. Everything else is going to change. Sometimes you're going to say Shema, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're going to have one text, sometimes you're going to have another. The one constant is that you'll always have those first three blessings. So if you have a solid understanding of them, you can really jump in to any prayer ceremony and know that you are going to be able to maximize your time and have a meaningful experience. Good? Is that a good plan for this evening? Any comments before we begin? Good. Fantastic. I'm going to share my screen with you right here. Okay. Do you see the slideshow, yeah? Okay. So last week we discussed in our class last week that the beginning of the first blessing is Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu, the God who is the God of our forefathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Noah pointed out immediately what most people point out who are not used to the Orthodox service, who maybe grew up differently, is that he asked the question, well, whoa, what happened to the matriarchs? Weren't they as important? And what we answered, where we ended our class last week, is saying that yes, the acknowledgement, the identifying God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob is not a shout out to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. The recognition of God as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the reason that it says God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, is because this is a reference to the three main attributes of God. In this way, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their adventures were meant to reveal a certain attribute of God. God has three main attributes. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in this context, are code words for those three attributes. There are other code words for those three attributes, and those are the three very next words that we're going to use. The very next words that we say are Hakel, the God who is, Hagadol, great, Hagibor, powerful, the Hanorah, awesome. Those are three other code words, and they correspond. So Elokei Avraham, the God of Abraham, that is Gadol. Elokei Yitzchak, the God of Yitzchak, that is Gibor. Elokei Yaakov, that is Norah. So it's these three different channels. And the way I like to say it is that your God is not going to be the same as my God. Because everybody experiences Hashem in their own way, because we are all a part, we all have a piece of Hashem in us, and it's different. It's different for everybody. Baruch Hashem, God, thank God. If you speak about any aspect of your life, I'm looking back now at this past year. Okay, this was a year of COVID-19. This was a year where people lost their jobs, people lost their family members, people lost money, people's health were damaged, people's mental health, people's emotional health, relationships crumbled. And yet, you ask certain people, hey, how's this whole COVID thing working out for you? And many people, myself included, will say there's been a lot of blessing. There's been a lot of blessing. That's been my experience. Now, it's hard for me to say that because I know that other people suffered. And I never want to, it's weird for me to think that something that has been a blessing for me has been a curse for somebody else. But you know what? If you were rooting for the Chiefs last night, you were really disappointed. If you were rooting for the Bucks last night, you were really happy. Two good human beings watching the same game. And somebody was really happy afterwards, and somebody was really not. You can be living in the same world. You can have the same God. You can be practicing the same religion, and your experience can be very, very different. So God uses different modes of revelation, and there is the revelation that is manifest through Abraham, which is the God of kindness. That's chesed. That's the attribute of God that took a vacant space and said, I want to create a world. And I want the ultimate goal of this world, this big, at the end of the day, through this whole thing, this is going to be a beautiful, beautiful world. It might take some time to get there, but it's going to get there. That's chesed. Then God says, but it might be a rough ride until we get there. That's discipline. And wherever you plug into the story, you're going to be experiencing something different. Hopefully, I hope, and again, we're all more or less within the same, right? We're millennials, we're Gen Z, everyone here, and we have been born into a very blessed, we live in a wonderful country, and as Jews, we have a lot of freedoms, and this is really, right, we're living the life in many ways. And our grandparents had a very different experience. So when you plug into this big story, you might be experiencing a different aspect of God. And some people are living the life of Abraham, and some people are living the life of Isaac, and some people are living the life of Jacob, who was a balance between the two. So again, we're not acknowledging Abraham. It's not like, the Academy Award speech. When we say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, we're speaking about three different attributes of God. And those three attributes are also going to be the bottom line of the first three blessings. So after we give this introduction of God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. The rest of the first blessing is going to be dedicated to the attribute of God through Abraham, which it manifested through Abraham, which is kindness. The second one is going to be the God of Isaac, meaning God's attribute of justice. And the third one, the third blessing, which is going to be the Atah Kadosh, that's going to be God manifested through the attribute of Norah, of truth, of Kadosh, of holiness, which is manifested through Jacob. Questions?
Can I ask just a technical
Yeah.
question? Is it supposed to, Yaakov, does that correlate with Tiferet?
Exactly. There are different words for the attribute depending on what context. It can be referred to as Tiferet, it can be referred to as Emes, it could be referred to as Rachamim, it could be referred to as Norah, it could be referred to as Kadosh. All of those things. Noah, yeah.
So when it comes to the matriarchs, I think at least in the Torah, it's like Rivka, gave,
Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah.
No, but what I'm saying is specifically you're talking about attributes, right? Because not Abraham, I don't think was the only one with kindness, because it was like Rivka had an excessive level of kindness. She went above and beyond, right? Not just getting
her personality, correct. Her personality matched up with Abraham's kindness, correct.
So are the other matriarchs known for any kind of attribute? Obviously, we talked about during the Musar stuff where it was, Abraham is the person with kindness, and this person's, this person and this person, because it is kind of hard to separate them because they're normally thought of in pairs. You think of Abraham and Sarah, they kind of go together. So splitting them off, are there any attributes, so to speak, for the matriarchs that they can be given?
I mean, there are human attributes for us to learn from the matriarchs. Absolutely, there's tons. I mean, listen, we know that Sarah's prophecy was greater than Abraham's. Sarah, as a spiritually, was on a higher level than Abraham. Rivka was necessary for Isaac. Isaac, his embodiment of God's discipline was too strong. Rivka's role as being chesed was meant to balance it, to sort of bring Isaac to a place that he could exist. Rivka brought out the best in Isaac. She created balance in Isaac. Rachel and Leah are code names for different aspects of the Shekhinah, the divine presence. So there is tons of in terms of the role that they play. But over here in Shemona Esrei, what we're trying to do is we're trying to tap in to those three core attributes of God, which are chesed, which are kindness, discipline, and the attribute of, in this case, Norah, awesomeness. So those three are specifically attributed to the three patriarchs. Okay, let's take a look at each one of the blessings, just so that when you say it, it will be meaningful to you. Okay. The main message of the first bracha. So Ari Goldstein is not back on the call, but he did a beautiful job last week when he read it last week, and since he's not here, let's just do a quick review. The first blessing, let's see if I can do it this way. The first blessing, who would like to read it in English from the great, the powerful, the awesome? On my screen, I'm seeing Noah, Caroline, I see Keith, I see Drew, Dan. Somebody, jump in. The English, you don't even have to read the Hebrew. Dan?
I'll go.
Right.
You said just starting with after the Almighty?
Yeah, right here. The great, the powerful, the awesome.
The great, the powerful, the awesome, most high, almighty, who bestows beneficent kindness, who possesses everything, who remembers the piety of the patriarchs, and who brings a redeemer to their children's children for the sake of his name with love.
Now, when you are praying, when you're standing in shul and you're trying to get high, you're trying to feel spiritual, you're trying to open up your mind, you're trying to open up your heart, and you read a translation like this, it is very bland. It's not very inspiring, although I think Drew last week was inspired by it. He said that it speaks to him, and maybe he's thought about it. But if you don't, if like many Jews, you just kind of walk in, you open up the siddur, you read it, and you're like, I'm not inspired. I hate Judaism. I'm going to watch football, right? You haven't given it a chance. We have to think about these words. So it begins and it says, the Most High. It's blocking my screen a little bit. Most High Almighty. Most High Almighty. Now, let's read. When you hear those words, Most High Almighty, I want you just to think for a second, reflect on that, contemplate that for a moment. Most High Almighty. How does that make you feel? What is the image that comes into your mind, the feeling that comes into your heart when you say those words, Most High Almighty? Think about it. Don't answer. Just think about it for a moment. Think about the overall impression. What's being communicated? Most High Almighty. Most High Almighty. Kel Elyon. Right? El, the powerful one, Elyon, who's on high. Think about that for a moment. Now, I want you to compare that, as you're thinking about it, to the last three words over here, which are Lima'an Shemo B'Ahava. For the sake of his name, Ba'ahava, with love. And think about those three words. On one, we have the word El Elyon, Almighty High God, versus the way the paragraph ends, Liman Shemo, for the sake of his name, Ba'ahava, with love. By the way, if you're ever writing a letter in Hebrew, right, we say, best regards, right? Ba'ahava is the way you would write a letter in Hebrew to someone that's close to you. Just wanted to check that everything's okay. Ba'ahava Shlomo, with love, right? That's sort of the way you sign off. So, do you feel somewhat of a contrast between when we refer to God as El Elyon and when we refer to God, when we say these words, L'man Shemo B'Ahava? Just are you sensing that a little bit? Do you feel somewhat of a contrast? You do. Noah does. Anyone else?
I feel like with Almighty, it's kind of almost out of sight. Like we can't really feel it because it's so far away, so far above us, in a place that we can't obviously understand. And then with love is more, I don't want to say casual, but it's more relationship.
Close, right? Exactly. If when you came to Masorah for the first time, I would say, welcome, Sarah Chamberlain. Welcome to Masorah. I am Rabbi Buxbaum. I am the Almighty on high Rabbi. Jews, I'm not. Rabbi Teitelbaum is. Right? But if Rabbi Teitelbaum would say, hey, it'd be like, who is this? You think he's better than me? And it doesn't sound very personal. If I would say, welcome to Masorah, where you will be very much loved for who you are, which is true, by the way, you will be, then you will feel much closer, you'll feel much happier. Now, when you see a paragraph begin with Kel Elyon, and it ends with B'Ahava, what does that tell you about the nature of the paragraph? It tells you that it's moving. There's a progression over here. Something that is starting out as Kel Elyon, as El Elyon, as an understanding of God that's beginning as Elyon, as a God that's up high, is turning into a relationship of love. And that means that if you track the words, if you go through it, you should be able to see that relationship unfolding. Now, I want to point out, because we're speaking about Abraham, and this is the blessing of kindness. Abraham, it was only through Abraham and Sarah and their stories, right? Now we're speaking about Abraham, the person, right? Abraham and Sarah. It was only through their kindness, their behavior, their adventures, that this concept of having a loving relationship with God came into being. That wasn't a given, right? Something that we take as a given, hopefully as Jews, that we have this relationship where you love God and God loves you, and it's parent-child, it's husband-wife, as we spoke about in the Thursday night class, right? This relationship where we speak about God in such endearing terms, right? That's not a given. It's not a given that should be the perception of God. One could say, well, God means business. God is a God of firebolts, and do you know in the Torah, if you want to look at where God is referred to as this, by the way, if anyone knows this, this is a wonderful, wonderful piece of trivia. Who in the Torah, what Torah personality calls God El Elyon, God on high? What Torah personality does that, and when does he do that? It's a really cool fun fact. In the story of Abraham, after Abraham goes to war, and he's in a war and he defends 5 kings against the 4 kings, and whatever, he engages in a war and he's successful. Many of you probably know what I'm referring to. So he meets afterwards a king who is referred to in the Torah as Malki Tzedek. Malki Tzedek, the king of Jerusalem, the righteous king of Jerusalem. That's the way he's referred to in the Torah. The Midrash refers to him, I don't know, by the way, if you find this interesting, but it's just a cool side point. We'll get back on topic in just a moment. But he's referred to in the Midrash as Shem, the son of Noach. Noach's son, Shem, who later on his identity becomes the righteous king of Jerusalem. And in a moment which is understood by our commentaries as sort of passing the torch, because before Abraham, who is the spiritual giant of the generation? Malki Tzedek, the righteous king of Jerusalem, Shem, the son of Noah. He was the king. He was the spiritual giant of the world. And this moment is somewhat of a passing of the torch to Abraham. He refers to God as God on high. Why do you think that the son of Noah refers to God as God on high? Because he lived in a world where nobody deserved any relationship with God. It was a world where there was very little spirituality. It was an immoral world. And yet God continues to keep the world going. Everybody, no one's serving me, everyone's ignoring me. I'm going to keep it going. That's God on high. He's up there. He's giving, but there's no relationship at all. It's hard to say with a parent and a child. It's not a good example, right? But if you think about giving, where there's no, I'm giving to someone purely unilaterally. They haven't done anything to deserve it whatsoever. I'm just giving. So it's great kindness, but in a way, I'm disconnected. I'm up high, and I'm just, giving charity. You give charity to a homeless person, right? You don't really care about them. You don't even know what they're doing with it, right? So in that sense, you kind of feel like you're better than them. I'm giving it to you because I'm going to be a nice guy, right? So in that sense, God is giving to the world, but the world doesn't deserve it. So he's the God on high. Now take a look at this first bracha, the first blessing of Shemona Esrei. Now it all comes together. It takes us through 3 stages. No, it begins as a one-way relationship. God is the Most High Almighty. He's bestowing his kindness. He possesses everything. Before we deserve anything, God is on high. We don't deserve to be here. We didn't do anything to be born. God is giving us that kindness. It's unilateral. So it's God who's most high. But then the next thing is he remembers the piety of the patriarchs. This, by the way, is not a great translation of the patriarchs. And this way actually could have been ancestors. but he remembers the piety of our ancestors. Slowly, over the course of history, great Jews came along who said, we're going to earn this relationship. We're going to do things. We're going to give back. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, Rachel, Leah, Moshe, Aaron, Miriam, King David, King Solomon, and everyone in between. Up until there's always been people that have given back to God, that have earned God's love. And then no more are we speaking about the Most High Almighty anymore. Now what are we speaking about? Stage 3, who brings redemption to their children's children. That's us. For the sake of his name. What does that mean, for the sake of his name? That means God is no longer doing it for us unilaterally. God says, I want this now. Because I've seen all of this. I've seen how much, I've seen that for now over 3,000 years. There are righteous people who say, God, I want to get close to you. Even if it's just nothing more than, you know what, you can be doing anything right now. I'm sure that there's good, what's on TV Monday nights at 7 o'clock? Is it Dancing with the Stars? Is it Survivor? Is it Full House?
It's The Bachelor. It's The Bachelor.
Oh, The Bachelor. The Bachelor. That's it. Yeah, I mean, right, you could be doing so much right now. But you're going to say, no, my Jewish identity is important. I want to learn what it means to pray. I want to connect with other Jews. I want to connect with the rabbi. I want to hang out in this space that's positive for my Judaism. God brings redemption to his children's children because he wants to. Ba'ahava, with love. It's the full transition that's being spoken to, the transition of God going from an almighty, powerful God to a relationship God, which is the type of Judaism that we all want to have, that relationship Judaism. That's the overall message of the first blessing. Before we move on to the second one, and we're not going to have, so we don't have that much time, we have about another 10, 12 minutes, but any questions about the overall message of the first blessing? And by the way, now when you read it now, it means something a little bit more. It's not just words. He possesses everything, but now it's the story of a relationship. And what a great way to begin the Amidah, to speak about a very real relationship with God, a relationship that we're doing our part to earn. We're earning God's love. God's earning our love. It's a mutual love. It's a mutual respect. That's something very beautiful.
Can I make just one quick thing? Obviously, in the Torah, there's a very different relationship between the people there, where God is in much more constant, much more personal communication. It feels like, where God said to Abraham, God said to, them, and here it's more of a, we're trying to reach out, but it's not as clear as God said, go Abraham, go to this place. It's not a clear message. The communication definitely feels, instead of two-way, much more one-way, for me at least.
Good, and that's the thing. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. I would say that that's perhaps the beauty of it. The fact that that as the generations move farther and farther away from Abraham, where if you ask the greats of our generation, of the previous generation, you say, how do you feel about your relationship with God? And they'd say, I love God with all my heart. I feel like we have a deep relationship. And you know what? God is concealed, God is hidden. And yet every single day, these people are showing up and they're praying with all their heart, and they're dancing through their prayer, and they're crying through their prayer, and they're studying Torah, and they're giving. And God is concealed. And whereas for Abraham, or before Abraham, it might have been 90% God, 10% human beings. Now, from our perspective, obviously not from God's perspective. From God's perspective, it's 100% God, right? But from what we can see, right, I can make the claim, right? And again, this is ridiculous what I'm about to say, right? But from my perspective, I can say, hey, God, Look how much I invested in this relationship today. What did you do today? Okay, he gave me my life, he breathed his life, but at least in terms of the relationship itself, right? I'm doing everything. And that's the beauty of it. And yet, I feel this relationship. I feel close to God. And that's beautiful. That's the major shift. So that's actually that is of great merit. The fact that God can be concealed, and yet you still find that people are pushing and pushing and pushing, and yet you ask them and they'll say, of course, my relationship is so real. I feel like Hashem is with me at every single moment. That shows that it's real, that it's truly a relationship. I think there's something beautiful about that. Okay, the next blessing, when we get into the second one, so the second blessing really brings to the forefront the attribute of Isaac and God's discipline. And the complicated relationship between Isaac and Hashem and God was obviously brought out most. It was captured in that moment of Akedas Yitzchak, when Isaac was almost sacrificed. And this idea of Isaac's way of channeling godly energy into the world is one where God means business, and God is not always warm and fuzzy, and that there is an aspect to God where every so often, God will say, if you want blessing in the world, then you got to earn it. And because of that, the story of humanity is one of high and low. But yet, no matter how bad things seem to get, as a Jewish people, we always seem to be able to fight back. We always seem to be able to rebuild. So if we read, and we'll read quickly through the second blessing. You are mighty forever, my master. You are, and I should take out you resuscitate the dead, the powerful one who delivers us, sustainer of the living with kindness. Again, resuscitate the dead with great mercy, supporter of the fallen, healer of the sick, releaser of the imprisoned, fulfiller of his faithfulness to those who sleep in the dust. Who is like you, master of mighty deeds? Who can be compared to you, king who causes death, who restores life, and causes deliverance to sprout forth? So over here, very clearly, the second blessing is, if you can see it jumps off the page, but the meditation, or what you're thinking about during the second blessing, is the fact that this world is a world of highs and lows. And God did not create a world where everything is always hunky-dory, everything is perfect, but for whatever reason, for all of the reasons that are all concealed to us, the way the world works is it waxes and wanes, it ebbs and it flows. Life is sometimes really good, life is sometimes really hard. We die, we're reborn, we're sick, we're healed. And again, we're speaking on a global level. And somehow or another, in the big mystery, which we'll never know the answer until the movie's over, but this is the way God wanted it. God wanted it to be a world that sways back and forth between these two things. That's the attribute of Isaac. That's the attribute of Gibor, the attribute of discipline. And when we're saying the second blessing, what we're really doing is we're being brave enough to stand before God and say, I don't understand why things happen the way they do. I don't understand why there's death and life, why there's good and there's bad, why there's high and there's low. I don't know. But all I know is that on this roller coaster ride, there is a conductor, and that's you, God. Mi chamocha ba'al gevuros. And there's no one like you. No one else is involved. There aren't other forces. I'm not a victim. I'm going on this journey because you're the conductor. And for whatever reason, this is how you want it to play out. That's the overall idea of the second blessing. And no matter what, I'm not going to lose hope. I'm always going to believe that things can get better, that things will get better, that everything is important, that everything is for a reason. I'm going to let go of always having to have everything make sense. If you need to have everything make sense, then you will never be happy, because that's not this world. This world was not meant to be black and white or to be clear. This world was meant to be complicated. This world was meant to be confusing. This world was meant to be paradoxical. And the more that you can let go of trying to own it, that you can try, because, like they say, if you understood God, what do they say? It's a great line that I'm killing. If you understood God, then you would be God. We don't understand it. And rejoice, and this is, by the way, what we're going to be speaking about a lot in the next 2 weeks as we prepare for Purim, because it's a lot about the theme of Purim, the whole idea of drinking on Purim and letting go, to the point, this is what the Talmud says, let go until you don't know the difference between Mordechai and Haman. You don't know the difference between blessing Mordechai and cursing Haman. What? What does that mean? Because we like to put everything as this is good and this is bad. Good guy, bad guy. Superman good, Lex Luthor bad. Batman good, Joker bad. Harry Potter good, Voldemort bad. That's the way we like to see everything. But the second blessing of Shemona Esrei says we don't know. We don't always know. Things are a lot more complicated than that. And true joy comes when you can just let go of trying to figure it out and say, God, I don't know why. I'm just rolling with it. I'm here for the ride. I'm here for the ride, and whatever you put in front of me, I'm gonna roll with it, and I'm not gonna stop believing in you. I'm not gonna stop loving you. And then we move, I'm going to finish up with this, and then I'll open it up for questions if anyone has. Then we move to the third blessing of Shemona Esrei, and that ends our introduction to Shemona Esrei. And that is, this should be the third bracha. The third blessing corresponds to Elokei Yaakov, and the attribute of Norah, the fact that God is somewhat separate, somewhat removed, the idea of holiness. You are holy, and your name is holy, and holy beings praise you every day forever. For you are an almighty king, great and holy. Again, it's very, very, these are words like, we have to be a little bit more sensitive to the Hebrew, because the translation is not great. But when we speak about God as being holy, what is Kedusha? What is this aspect of holiness? When we say, when people get married, so in Hebrew, there's a couple of different words, but the beginning of the process of getting married in Hebrew is called Kiddushin, becoming holy to each other. To become holy to something is the highest level of commitment to that thing. I can be friends with everybody, but I can't have Kiddushin with everyone. That means that that's a higher level of relationship. When we say God is holy and his holy ones praise his name, who are his holy ones? That's an exclusive club. You know who's part of that club? Whoever wants to be. You can be part of it. Not everybody's part of it, but nobody's locked out of it. But Jacob took the relationship to an even higher level. Jacob experienced a closeness, a relationship, a deep relationship with God. That's the relationship that we're yearning for. So the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, we focus the most on God and his kindness, the fact that God is a giver and he empowers us to be able to give back and create a relationship. In the second bracha of Shemona Esrei, we speak about how God is mysterious in the fact that there are highs and lows, and yet we are ready to stay committed, because we know that there's always going to be hope. There's always a reason behind what happens. And in the third blessing, we put ourselves somewhat in this exclusive crew of being Kedoshim, of being part of the inner circle. Right? We're associating ourselves with that inner circle. We're saying, God, you are Kadosh. And we want to be part of the Kadosh Club. We want to be part of that. We want to be part of this unique, this exclusive group. And once we're in that headspace, now we're ready to start asking our requests. The next blessings of Shemona Esrei, the next 12 blessings of Shemona Esrei, are all us asking the various different requests. And maybe sometime in the future, maybe after Passover, maybe even before, depending on how things play out. We'll be able to go a little bit more into detail into those, but at least for now, I wanted to make sure that we have a solid understanding of those first three blessings. These are the meditations you can have every single time you go in to pray. And really, if you just think a little bit deeper into what these things mean, it really puts you in this beautiful, beautiful space.